Not supposed to have a rally. We'll call it a peaceful protest. That way we can do whatever we want.
In Oshkosh, the president accepting the endorsement of more than 36 county sheriffs, comparing and contrasting his law and order policies with the Democrats' pledge to defund the police.
The socialists will not stop until they've ransacked America and laid waste to our cities.
President Trump also going after Joe Biden on the economy, accusing him of wanting to raise taxes by $4 trillion.
Fox's John Roberts and some intrigue from the president, telling reporters aboard Air Force One he will pardon someone on Tuesday. He did not say who that will be. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download.
Are you fed up
now
with
at
those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Mezcla Dos opened its doors in 2010 and has been proudly serving the people of Guam for 10 amazing years. In celebration of their 10th anniversary, Mezcla Dos will be offering 20% off on all burgers for a limited time only. Terms and conditions apply. Please call them at 646-6295 for more information, or visit them at their Upper Tumon location, right across Kmart. Thank you, Guam, for making Mezcla Dos one of your favorite hamburger spots.
Top secret information during his tenure with the CIA in the 80s and sold America out about a dozen years after leaving the agency.
By conspiring to communicate classified information to intelligence officials of the People's Republic of China.
U.S. Attorney Kenji Price. The criminal complaint says Ma continued to pass along intelligence to China while working as an FBI contractor before getting busted last week in an undercover operation. Price in a news conference warning anyone who betrays the U.S.
We have a long memory, and those who feed classified information to the People's Republic of China will not escape the long arm of the law.
Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
The Trump administration has given final approval for oil and gas leasing plans for Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Although development is still years away, critics worry about the industry's impact on wildlife. It's Independence Day in Afghanistan. It's been marked with a rocket attack on the capital city of Kabul. Rockets landing near some of the foreign embassies. Not clear yet who fired them or if anyone was hurt. The NBA's postseason finally getting underway on Monday.
Playoffs in the Orlando bubble starting with overtime.
Around the Jokic screen. Hit him with the hesitation move. Murray. Oh, he's on fire.
Call courtesy of ESPN. Jamal Murray with a lay-in, part of a team-high 36 points as the Denver Nuggets defeat the Utah Jazz in OT. 135-125 take their series opener. Donovan Mitchell with 57 points for the Jazz. That's the third most by any player in a postseason game in NBA history. Meantime, the Toronto Raptors began their repeat run with a 134-110 shellacking of the Brooklyn Nets. The Boston Celtics topped the Philadelphia 76ers 109-101, and the LA Clippers down the Dallas Mavericks 118-110. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Chili's introduces the new crispy ribs. Mouth-watering Texas-sized ribs tossed in country fried steak batter. Order your crispy ribs as an appetizer or a full rack entree with your choice of 2 sides. Each order comes with 1 of 3 new dipping sauces: the creamy avocado salsa, sweet Kentucky, or the sweet mango chipotle sauce. Chili's crispy ribs are available for a limited time only, so hurry in and enjoy a crispy, juicy ribs experience today. Chili's is on the 2nd floor at the Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's, we do ribs like no place else.
Afadade, this is Carl from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
They're back. any footlong is a $5 footlong when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Every day, right, Jose?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, on Saturday and Sunday, I set the alarm on my watch so that when 1600 rolls around, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. That pops out of my mouth.
Even during a P-Corps 1.
Especially during a P-Corps 1. Yeah. Okay, so we've paid homage to the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Let's go from there to Zemi Ikut. As usual, the Daily News is not running a homegrown editorial. They're running some boilerplate from USA Today. So I'm just going to skip it, and I'm going to substitute something that Tom Woods wrote about lockdowners. This will be the second time I've introduced you to Tom's philosophy on lockdowners. I suppose for the 1 in 100 people out there in our international radio listening audience who doesn't understand what a lockdowner is, I'd better explain. Well, perhaps I'll just give you a good example. Are you ready for a good example of what a lockdowner is? Lou Leon Guerrero. Yeah. Lou Leon Guerrero, if she were a rancher, would lock the barn door even if the horse was still inside.
Even a burning fire?
Even a burning fire. She'd lock it down. Here's what Tom says. By now, we've all gotten the message. You're selfish if you like to do the kind of things that once gave your life meaning. For these people, life is about nothing but avoidance of death. Virtually everything you looked forward to has been canceled, and no one will tell you you can have those things back. When we, quote, when we have a vaccine, comes the raving lunatic's answer. I'm going to make a pronouncement right here. We will never have a vaccine to deal with the Wuhan virus. According to what I've read, the others call it the COVID virus. It's not limited just to the disease we're dealing with now. It's the common cold and a couple of other things we've had to deal with before. The common cold, you know, one of the little bits of medical orthodoxy that every one of us has known since we were a kid is there's no cure for a common cold. Antibiotics won't do it. Vaccinations won't do it. About the state of the art right now for the common cold is a hot bowl of chicken soup.
I feel better already.
Yeah, just thinking about it makes you feel better already. That would be the mainland edition. On Guam, of course, it's Maipina Cardune, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if doctors were able to prescribe it, you know, they charge you $50 for an office visit, and the drugstore charge you another $50 for the hot bowl of chicken soup.
Careful, that might be false information. Might have to fact check you on that cure.
All right. But that's the closest we've ever come to a cure for the common cold. So if we can't cure the common cold, which has been around ever since, what makes us think we'll ever cure the Wuhan virus, which for all we know was engineered by some top-flight bioengineers in the People's Republic of China? Maybe not, maybe. So I'm just going to say there'll never be a vaccine. Now, medical science will come up with ways of dealing with those who are stricken by the Wuhan virus, perhaps lessening the length of the illness, modifying its severity, etc., like we've done with so many other things. But I am telling you now that there will never be a vaccine that will inoculate you so that you can't catch the Wuhan virus. You know, like the Salk vaccine changed the world so that polio was no longer a threat. The smallpox vaccination basically made the smallpox virus an endangered species, if not extinct. But back to what Tom is saying. Virtually everything you look forward to has been canceled, and no one will tell you when you can have those things back. Quote, when we have a vaccine, comes the raving lunatic's answer. Nobody was giving you that answer when they were pushing 15 days to flatten the curve. They didn't dare. Instead, they kept us in our homes for 15 days, and then 15 days after that, and 15 days after that. Each time they pushed the date back, we grew more demoralized, more resigned to a barren life without, quote, large gatherings. That is, everything that makes life fun, and virtual events over Zoom. I've had to work with Zoom a little bit, and I can very clearly tell you I hate it. It is not a substitute for a real meeting. And I've gotten to the point that when I hear the word Zoom, even if it's two little kids playing with their toy cars going Zoom, Zoom, I've taken a little bit with a nausea because I don't even want to hear that word. Oh, and no hugs, no weddings, 10 people at your father's funeral, and a long list of other grotesque demands. What metrics were they using to decide when we'd be allowed back out again, when our businesses could open and when they could operate at a level that made profit even a remote possibility, and when those life-giving pleasures that bring us meaning and fulfillment could be resumed? Who knows? All we heard was everything is canceled. Maybe you could have it in 2021. Maybe you could have it when there's a vaccine, as if there's a guarantee of that. Well, terrifying statistics came out last week showing the grim, if entirely predictable result. Affects all this inhuman regimentation has been having on the young, particularly those between 18 and 24. Here are some figures from the federal government's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. They are percentages of people who have considered suicide within the previous 12 months, organized by age. Note that 18 to 25% group fluctuates between 6.8% and 11%. Now, from the Centers for Disease Control, we find that percentage for 18 to 24 group has leaped to 25%. And this survey asks not about previous 12 months, but whether they've considered suicide just in the past 30 days. Note also the huge dump in the numbers for people in their mid-20s through their 40s, to see the graphic more as you were. We've taken away everything they love, deprived them of the opportunity to socialize and experience those irreplaceable moments of youth, and demanded that they accept this dystopia as the new normal. Now, let's just talk a second here about socialization. Man Now, when I say man, I suppose all the other 19 genders out there are getting all angry, right?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. The other 19 or more genders are very angry because I use the forbidden word man. I'm going to try to excuse myself, but by saying when I say man, I mean mankind or humankind or Homo sapiens. But that probably isn't good enough. There are probably going to be nasty graffiti written about me on the walls of the, I was about to say the men's room, but that won't work either, will it, Jose?
No.
This really gets complicated, you know?
There is a separate room for that.
Yeah. There's one
That's
for
where they all go to.
one for all of the sexes, and then they can go to a different room to write bad stuff on the wall, right?
They're still painting the acronym on the door.
There you go. Yeah. So humans are social animals. And stop to think about it. Outside of inflicting some kind of physical pain, what is the most severe punishment that we could lay on a human being? The answer is solitary confinement. Humans don't do very well in solitary confinement. Some of the criminal defense bar has advanced the proposition that locking somebody up in solitary confinement is a violation of the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. It's cruel and unusual punishment. So when people aren't able to associate with one another, that is, socialize, it doesn't work very well on their psyche and as a general proposition. So here's what Tom says. We've taken away everything they love, deprived them of the opportunity to socialize. Part of the natural order is that parents make sacrifices for their children, not the other way around. If vulnerable people wish to isolate themselves, a perfectly sensible course of action for some individuals, then they should isolate themselves. Now, for once, I know what the word they means. A lot of times it's a problem. They should isolate themselves, not demand that young people sacrifice everything dear to them and live atomized existences for a period of time that our overlords refuse to specify. As I pass through middle age, the thought would never occur to me to make these demands on younger people. Am I prepared to tell them, well, I enjoyed these pleasures when I was young, for the sake of my comfort, they can't have them? Who thinks like that? Well, I can think of one person. Some of us, yes, even many of us in middle age and beyond, are prepared to say, this is no way for anyone, young or old, to live. We want a life that includes weddings, family celebrations, hugs, live concerts, drinks with friends, thriving businesses, tall tales, the arts, school dances, theater, tall tales, and friendship from less than 6 feet away. And we're willing to accept what risk accompanies these things because no other kind of life is worthy of a human being. And it's not just the deprivation of basic non-negotiable joys that the lockdowns cause. Even the New York Times, about as unreliable a source of information as I can think of right off the top of my head, but even the New York Times admitted that lockdowns will lead to 1.4 million excess TB deaths, tuberculosis, 500,000 excess HIV deaths, and 350,000 excess malaria deaths because people aren't able to go to their doctors on a regular basis. That's on top of the 1.2 million children UNICEF expects to die as a result of the lockdowns. Not to mention how many people have prevented by deadly regulations driven by irrational fear or by irrational fear itself, drummed into them by grossly irresponsible news media from receiving major medical care they need. In the UK, they've been predicting more avoidable cancer deaths than Wuhan virus deaths because of this problem. Meanwhile, doomers, a new word, doomers, D-O-O-M-E-R-S, not to be confused with dormers, which is a real Joe Cruz concoction. One time, Jose, I was explaining to the real Joe Cruz what a dormer was. It's an architectural feature on a house with a peaked roof.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I asked the real Joe Cruz, do you know what a dormer is? And real Joe Cruz, someone who lives in a dorm? Yeah, so now we have doomers. Doomers have been peddling a comic book version of the virus. When Wisconsin courts have said bars could reopen, this was supposed to lead to a massive spike in deaths there. All the social media schools said so. No such thing happened. Did this cause them to rethink their comic approach? You can guess the answer. They practically cheered when spikes hit Arizona, Texas, and Florida, and they blamed those states reopening, even though those states had been open for 8 weeks before the spikes occurred. Those spikes are over now, and they were brought down without lockdowns. Yes, some bars were closed, but what really happened, as Alex Berenson puts it, they simply pretended they were restaurants. Cool. South Dakota never closed at all. They had an outbreak at a meatpacking plant, but those are unrepresentative of society at large when it comes to the virus. The state is doing great, 17 deaths per 100,000. Oh, and they have low population density, you say. Well, Rachel Maddow insisted that disaster was bound to strike there, even mocking the governor, saying, "You realize it's an infectious disease?" Talking about unreliable sources of information. It's a good thing that New York Times and Rachel Maddow are mentioned in the same article here. Well, I think you get the point. I just want me to talk about Sweden first. Everybody wants to criticize Sweden for not locking down. And no wonder. If a country can have good results without locking down, it makes the lockdowners look like the crazed sociopaths they are. Oh, Sweden had a high death rate. That's what they say. Well, around 3/4 of the deaths in Sweden occurred in some kind of long-term care facility. And the Swedes admit their failure there. But that has nothing to do with the overall soundness of Sweden's approach, since those facilities are isolated from society. How did a society at large do? Extremely well. Number of people under 50 who died out of a country of 10 million? 70. These are the days they barely mention. There are barely any deaths at all in Sweden. So I think you get the point here. Tom Woods comes down pretty hard on doomers and lockdowners. 2 new words in the Tall Tales vocabulary. Doomers and lockdowners. Does our government rate the assignment of either of those 2 words? Is she a doomer? Is she a lockdowner? Well, I kind of think so. But I'll listen to you. I'll watch your comments on Facebook. And if you want to call 888-8255, 888-TALK, and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, it wouldn't be the first time. And you might even get lucky. Okay, so we've disposed of Demi Akotny. Let's go next to the card. And this is what I got on the card. Let's see, Tina is up to 44 days since she has detected any kind of emergency to the public health or safety that would cause her to call the legislature into emergency session and waive public hearing requirements on bills. So, Yeah, so that's pretty good. Thank you, Tina, for keeping an eye on that for us. And we know that you are the classic case of the canary in the coal mine, that you will be the first one to detect these anomalies when they occur. Okay, so let's see. What have I got on the card today? I've got People versus Matt Murphy. I've got Father Paul versus the governor. I've got John and Vince versus the governor. I've got the governor versus the people. Boy, the governor's getting a lot of time on the card today, huh? Transparency versus the AG. Tall Tales versus CNN. Now, this item, Tall Tales versus CNN, I don't know how many sexes will be tuned in, but I can tell you this. This will be of interest to every person out there who has a cervix, and it will also be of interest to every person out there who doesn't have a cervix. Yes. Yeah, I think I talked about that a couple of days ago, and the real Joe Cruz was a little bit incredulous that I'd ever talked about it before.
I'm very, very proud of my non-cervix
status. Of not having a cervix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
all right.
we talked about.
Okay. So, and then I've got Brown versus Yale. That's the last item on the card today, if I can get to it. So let's start out with the People versus Matt Murphy. There was a write-up in the Daily News. The most complete write-up to come out yet was in the Daily News. And this is what it said. A 61-year-old man is accused of using medical issues to leave mandatory quarantine and has been charged with a misdemeanor. Matthew Frederick Murphy was charged with failure to remain within quarantine premises as a misdemeanor, a complaint filed with the Superior Court on Friday stated. The complaint shares more details of Murphy's alleged violation of the island's mandatory quarantine. Murphy arrived on Guam last month and was housed at the Bayview Hotel, one of the hotels contracted to be a government quarantine site. Murphy said he is a longtime resident of Guam who arrived from Georgia, a designated high-risk area. Well, I could understand that, especially Atlanta. You know, boy, I hope the Jack never goes to Atlanta. Yeah, Jack, if you're listening, please don't go to Atlanta because drive-through restaurants are very dangerous places in Atlanta. I wouldn't want anybody to take a shot at you just because you were doing your thing in a drive-through restaurant. Anyhow, Murphy arrived from Georgia, a designated high-risk area. The government requires a 14-day quarantine at a government facility for travelers who don't have a negative Wuhan virus test taken within 5 days of arrival. Our office is prepared to take criminal action against those who violate quarantine orders when warnings and education efforts aren't enough, said Attorney General Levin Camacho. The AG's office said violation of quarantine or isolation orders is a misdemeanor. It carries a punishment of up to 1 year in prison and up to a $1,000 fine. On July 9, Murphy flew to Guam via United Airlines from Honolulu, and at that time, Guam was in pandemic condition of readiness 2, which, for Tall Tales purposes, is going to be referred to as POS 2. I'm going to use standard point vocabulary here. No more of this, what does the governor call it?
I have no idea.
You know, the clever little acronym,
P-Corps.
P-Corps. Yeah.
P-Corps.
Yeah. See, I can't even remember it.
It could change.
POS.
POS.
That's the Tall Tales vocabulary for it. Murphy was required to be quarantined at a government facility, and he was reportedly upset about being quarantined, the complaint stated. On July 14, Murphy attempted to leave the quarantine on foot, but was stopped by law enforcement personnel, the complaint stated. He returned to his room after being informed that he would be arrested if he left the quarantine facility. Shortly thereafter, and contrary to quarantine requirements, Murphy failed to notify public health medical staff that he was having himself transported from the quarantine facility to Guam Memorial for alleged health issues. He was transported to the hospital and was later discharged, but failed to return back to the quarantine facility. I don't know how else you could return.
He could have had a front-facing oceanside view. He returned front.
I suppose. But he failed to return to the quarantine facility, the complaint stated. Guam Police Department Wuhan virus response team was activated to locate Murphy, who was later found at an off-site hotel in Tumon, documents state. So that's the most complete report that any of the news media has laid out. I've got some points of law here that I'll get into right after the break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? You wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So, picking it up again here, I'm looking at 19 GCA section 19604. And that deals with quarantine. Subsection B. The public health authority shall adhere to the following conditions and principles when isolating or quarantining individuals or groups of individuals. So the statute makes a distinction between isolating and quarantining. And briefly, it means this: someone who may have an infectious disease is to be quarantined. If they, there's only one person here, so if they have an infection disease, then they are to be isolated. A little different vocabulary. So isolation and quarantine must be the least restrictive means necessary to prevent the spread of the contagious or possibly contagious disease. May include but are not limited to confinement to private homes or private and public premises. 2, isolated individuals must be confined separately from quarantined individuals. So you can see how important that distinction is. 3, the health status of isolated and quarantined individuals must be monitored regularly to determine if they require isolation or quarantine. 4, if a quarantined individual subsequently becomes infected or is reasonably believed to have become infected with a contagious or possibly contagious disease, that person must be promptly removed to isolation. 5, isolated and quarantined individuals must immediately be released when they pose no substantial risk of transmitting a contagious or possibly contagious disease to others. 6, the needs of persons isolated and quarantined shall be addressed in a systematic and complete fashion, including but not limited to providing adequate food, clothing, shelter, means of communication with those in isolation or quarantine, and outside these settings, medication and competent medical care. 7, premises used for isolation and quarantine shall be maintained in a safe and hygienic manner, like the 19th floor, and be designed to minimize the likelihood of further transmission, etc. 8, to the extent possible, cultural and religious beliefs should be considered in addressing the needs of individuals in establishing and maintaining isolation and quarantine premises. It's interesting. Even people not in quarantine really don't have a whole lot of opportunities to celebrate or to engage in their free exercise of religion. Okay, then we get to the hard part. C, subsection C, persons subject to isolation or quarantine shall obey the public health authorities' rules and orders and shall not go beyond the isolation or quarantine premises. Failure to obey these provisions shall constitute a misdemeanor. So if you're in quarantine and you leave in violation of the rules, the way I read this, the moment you step foot out the door, you are in violation and you have committed a misdemeanor. And then there are a couple of others here. Anybody who, no person other than authorized public health authority should enter, and anybody who comes in who's not authorized to come into a quarantine facility, themselves commits a misdemeanor. So, pretty interesting. Then there's some provisions here about how a person is able to go before the court to get released from quarantine for good cause shown. So where we are now is Matt Murphy has been arrested. The Attorney General has announced that not arrested, but has been charged, apparently, with evading the quarantine. Attorney General did a press release on it, and from there, I would just do a little bit of speculation. I don't have any inside information on this. I can look up 10 GCA 19 online, chapter 19 online, but the Attorney General, in the face of someone whose picture has been in the paper, see if I still have that picture here. No, I don't have the picture anymore, but there was a picture in the paper here of Matt Murphy hanging out the window of a hotel with a sign that's saying, "Free us." And of course, he was on the point with both Ray Gibson and I. And as I remember, he pretty much laid out the facts of how he violated the quarantine procedures. Now, he had his own take as to what happened and what should have happened and what should not have happened. But from what I heard and what the newspaper says, he made out a prima facie case of violating the quarantine provision. So that being the case, and assuming that a lot of people heard what he said and read what he said, etc., that being the case, what position is the Attorney General in? What position if the Attorney General takes no action? What position is the Attorney General in if he did what he did? If the Attorney General takes no action, is that guy that sits over there in the lazy boy and knows the answer to every question that I refer to as a smart money, is he going to say, well, the Attorney General, the do-nothing Attorney General, that guy violated quarantine, everybody knows about it. He ain't going to do nothing. Yeah. And then the other side of it is, if the Attorney General does what he did, he files a criminal complaint against Matthew Murphy then that same guy is going to say, why aren't they out there catching criminals instead of ice all over the island, a big crime wave here in the island? And he's going after this, this petty stuff like quarantine violation. So that probably describes possible thought processes that the Attorney General or his prosecutor, Basil O'Malley, the chief prosecutor, might have gone through. And ultimately, whatever satisfaction or dissatisfaction we have with our Attorney General will be settled at the polls in 2022 because he is an elected official.
I have a question, Bob.
Sir.
Now, we're talking about the legality or violation of the mandatory, the quarantine rules or regulations, whatever it's called, mandate. Yeah. The first definition you had said a person may be infected, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a legal definition of may that could change a person's status in quarantine? From having to be quarantined, or is it still a process?
It's just the process, yeah. The process. Everybody has trouble with may and shall because everybody learned somewhere that may is mandatory and may is permissive and shall is mandatory. And their words, it's kind of like 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. They're words to be avoided if possible when you're drafting a statute. So it's much better if you want your statute to have mandatory language to say must, right? And do you remember the old distinction between may and can when the grammar Nazis were teaching you grammar in third grade?
No.
Can means you have the ability to do something. May means you have the permission to do it. Yeah. Miss Posnicker, can I go to the toilet? I guess you probably can. Okay, I'm going to go. You don't have permission, but you said I could go.
My teacher said, I don't know, can you? And walked away.
Whereas, then the kid says, oh, I'll try it the other way. Miss Posnicker, may I go to the toilet? And she says, you may if you can.
True.
But may in a statute describes a possibility, right? It does not have any mandatory or permissive dimension to it. So the one who would invoke the power conveyed by the statute has to meet some other test. May be quarantined. That doesn't mean, well, this guy just got out. This guy was flown by helicopter from GRMC with a certificate from 5 doctors that he's the picture of health, and he just landed at the airport. I don't care. Statute says I may quarantine him. Doesn't say doesn't say what I have to do or anything else. Mm-hmm. So in order to quarantine that person, you'd have to have more than just the word may in a statute.
So that word may refers more to the person doing the quarantining than the person being quarantined.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so much for Matt Murphy. I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of Mr. Murphy.
We did yesterday.
Well, excuse me. I used the wrong pronoun. I have a feeling that I have heard the last of Mr. Matt Murphy.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah. Okay, well, anybody who wants to call Tall Tales, 888-TALK, 888-8255, and I'll talk to you at least long enough to tell you that I don't want to talk to you. I'll be at least that open-minded. Okay, so we go from Matt Murphy to Father Paul versus Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. And this is kind of a continuation of an item that was on the card yesterday, which was Frenchie versus Father Ron and Lou Leon Guerrero. And I don't know exactly how to address this, but I'm looking at a paper in front of me that says KUAM News on it. Yeah. So I'm going to read something. I'm going to read the printout of KUAM News from last night. So just have a grain of salt handy. That's the only thing that I would require. The title of it is Priest Criticizes Governor for Not Giving Churches Essential Designation. One segment of our island community that's normally known for compassion and encouragement is uncharacteristically lashing out. And elected leader, at least one member of the clergy, is upset that religious services aren't on the exclusive list of those organizations deemed essential during POS 1. So this clergy member is upset that church services are not seen as essential. Father Paul Goffigan specifically criticized the governor for not enabling spiritual leaders to provide calming devotions for their flock. The priest announced on KUAM's interactive talk show, The Link, this morning, religious services were lumped in with food and beverage services, theaters and bowling alleys. And that's when I began to wonder, how sincere is the governor in protecting the people? Because you cannot pick and choose who you will allow to go out and who you want to stay in. It's not right for the government to once again push the church aside as non-essential and to close those doors. Where are the people going to run to in this darkness? They need to run somewhere. The Archdiocese had to roll back masses starting this past weekend to parking lot and live streaming services, which Father Paul says has an effect on the island's Catholic faithful not being able to receive Holy Communion in the traditional way. And then yesterday I went into this Jungle Watch post that talked about the possibility that the agreement between the liturgical committee headed by Father Paul and public health officials would have allowed masses to go forward with the usual safety precautions until a priest named Ron Richards got involved and pulled the rug out from under that so that masses in the churches would not be permitted. So my own take on this is this, and I've mentioned this before. Way back when Commissar DeNorsi told Father Paul and the liturgical committee, we will not approve sacramental services. The church should have gotten up on its hind legs and roared, because public health officials can make regulations concerning the health of the people, things like social distancing and masks and things like that. But, you know, we decided back in 1789 that government officials would not have the right to tell people of any religion that they could not practice their religion. I'm reading from this little book here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, you know, the governor's wrong for not allowing the free exercise, but if you always roll over, you know, when it's time to stand up for your rights, you're going to get really good at rolling over, and that's apparently what the church has done. Instead of standing up for the Mass and for the parishioners, the church has apparently decided, let's make it easy for the governor. That's not what it's all about. Catholics understand that the religion is the Mass. That is the Catholic religion. Now, I had a friend say the other day, well, not the other day, but way back in the beginning of this stuff, well, you know, the Mass isn't essential. You can watch it on TV. And a Catholic will tell you, well, you could watch it on TV, but Mass is not a spectator sport. Mass means that you are in church and that you are in a state of grace as you eat the body of Christ. That's what the Catholic that's what the faith is all about. And it should never be compromised by people who have the duty to see to it that Catholics can take that sacrament. Okay, let's take a short break here.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumont. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Mezcla Bistro in Agagna is open for takeout and delivery services from Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call them now at 479-2652 and get your Mezcla fix today.
Okay, so here we are. We got about 7 minutes to go before that big halftime show that we all been waiting for. So Father Paul versus Lou. It all comes back. Almost everything comes back to the same basic point. And I've got some more stuff. I've got John and Vince versus Lou, Lou versus the people. And that is that the governor, it seems, is finding the easy way out by overreacting to this whole Wuhan virus situation that we're in right now. And as was pointed out yesterday, people have to live. And I pointed it out again today. And it's very possible that there will never be a vaccine. So in the history of mankind, we've dealt with other serious diseases. I mentioned smallpox earlier. I mentioned polio earlier. And in none of those cases did everybody dig a hole in the ground, crawl in the hole, and then pull in the hole after them. Some method of living with the disease was always accomplished. We're not trying to do that right now. You know, we're killing our economy, and we're having probably a serious effect on the mental health of our citizens. Well, let me go to John and Vince here for a few minutes before the big halftime show. Starting out with John Thomas Brown, who's a lawyer, but he's a pretty good guy anyhow. And John Thomas Brown says, now we're back where we started from, and perhaps we have learned from the experience as some other places have. For instance, Washington, D.C., according to an article in the Washington Compost, they have taken a more fine-tuned approach to business lockdowns. Extracting selectively from the article, it reports 2 months since the nation's capital allowed restaurants to seat customers indoors again, Wuhan virus cases are again climbing and more people are dining out while likely infections. Government officials in the district and beyond are navigating tough waters as they try to revitalize a dining industry that makes their cities vibrant and buoys struggling local budgets. while also trying to stop a resurgence of infections. Critics have urged the mayor to crack down on restaurants, given the known risk of transmission. The mayor said the only thing she's going to crack down on is Donald Trump. Beep, beep. Yeah.
I thought she was serious.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah. Critics have urged the mayor to crack down on restaurants, given the known risk of transmission. The mayor said her administration is instead responding with an ongoing education blitz by the D.C. Alcohol Beverage Regulation Administration, which normally enforces underage drinking laws and license compliance. As of last week, 13 businesses have been fined $1,000. Inspectors let 47 establishments off with warnings, and the district has moved to suspend 2 liquor licenses. City officials say those cases are not the norm. Most businesses just needed reminders. Andrew Klein, an attorney and lobbyist who works with the Restaurant Association of Washington, says establishments know they're in danger of losing business if city officials lose faith. So on. On Guam, we should know where we can safely go and go there. Responsible businesses deserve customers and do not deserve to be shut down. It's not just our economic life, as we have learned from lockdowns. It's also our restrained social life that besets us. We should know by now that Wuhan virus situation is not an all or nothing proposition. That's the message from John Brown. The Wuhan virus situation is not an all or nothing proposition. Shutdowns, as we wailed from the beginning, impact our customary and constitutionally sanctioned in the First Amendment rights of speech, assembly, and association, and other personal rights in subsequent amendments, including due process rights. Now, let's get out our law and order notebooks here, Jose. These rights are characterized as, quote, fundamental by the U.S. Supreme Court. Fundamental rights are not absolute, but are strictly scrutinized for usurpation. Some level of restraint of the liberties of these fundamental rights by government is endured under certain conditions. This general statement is expressed in language such as, quote, the state's important regulatory interests are generally sufficient to justify reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions. Now, that's the general rule. But when those regulatory interests are contested, the court must first consider, okay, let's come back to this. We'll come back to this strict scrutiny article.
Five, four, three, two.
Begin on Jack Callahan, Fox News. Democrats presenting several speakers in a 2-hour broadcast Monday evening. Among them, Joe Biden's former chief rival in a bid for party unity.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, like 2016, finished second in delegates through the primary season. And again, he sought to be a unifier with his convention remarks, bringing traditional and progressive values together.
A movement like never before of people who are prepared to stand up and fight for democracy and decency.
Sanders said he still plans to push toward a Medicare for all health insurance model for America, but adds the first order of business is to win on November 3rd.
Fox's Gernal Scott, former First Lady Michelle Obama, wrapped up the first night of the convention saying that Donald Trump is the wrong president.
He cannot meet this moment
He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us.
President Trump spending the week visiting swing states, Minnesota and Wisconsin on Monday, telling an audience in Mankato, Minnesota, a Democrat win will mean higher taxes.
This is a puppet. He won't do it intentionally. He just says, well, whatever they want, because he has no clue. He has no clue. I ended low-income housing being built in the suburbs and destroying people's American dream. You know that. If Biden and Harris get into power, they've pledged to raise your taxes by $4 trillion.
The president will visit Arizona and Iowa on Tuesday. He has signed an emergency declaration to help Iowa farmers recover from last week's windstorm that destroyed millions of dollars in crops. Fox 61 in Hartford reports a small plane has crashed into a home in Groton, Connecticut, but the occupants of the house and those aboard the plane survived. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, download Perino and Steyerwalt. I'll tell you what.
State-run unemployment offices are so antiquated that some people waited 3 months before they got their first check. So how do they expect them to then calculate a 70% of people whose wages went up and down? And it's kind of a mess. And the Democrats seem to me to have the upper hand here for now.
Well, sure, because the Republicans don't have their act together.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. There's never been a more critical time. Fox News Media is bringing America together. America is watching news and fearless debate on Fox News Channel. We're invested in you from Wall Street to Main Street to your street with Fox Business. America is listening wherever you are, on radio and podcasts, trending the stories you need anytime you want online, and Fox Nation, streaming the entertainment that celebrates America. Fox News Media, America's news, and much more.
It's been 100 years today that women have had the right to vote in the United States.
The 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18, 1920, which guaranteed all American women the right to vote in a women's suffrage movement that began 72 years earlier. Though despite the 19th Amendment and due to Jim Crow laws in the South, it wasn't until 1965 until all women in the U.S. were free to cast ballots. It would be another 7 years before women forged through the Equal Rights Amendment. And today, one of the many commemorative events around the country. An elite all-women's skydiving team is set to soar over Nashville, Tennessee, the 36th and final state needed to ratify women's right to vote. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The Golden State Killer faces his victims in court beginning later today in the first of 4 days of hearings before former police officer Joseph D'Angelo is sentenced to life in prison for 13 murders that they know of and nearly 50 rapes committed between 1975 and 1986. SpaceX with another launch scheduled this morning.
Elon Musk's SpaceX is planning to launch another of its Falcon 9 rockets today. This rocket will deliver another batch of the small satellites making up its Starlink network, which aims to deliver high-speed internet connectivity to the entire planet. This specific rocket being used today has been used 5 times previously, and the goal again is for it to land on a barge in the Atlantic Ocean and be reused more. Launch is scheduled for shortly after 10:30 this morning at Cape Canaveral. Eben Brown, Fox News.
A survival story from New Mexico where a hiker who had been missing on the Santa Fe Trail for 2 weeks has been found alive. The man in his 50s hurt his back while hiking and couldn't stand or walk. He finally managed to get the attention of another hiker who alerted rescuers. He's now recovering in the hospital. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Chili's introduces the new Crispy Ribs. Mouth-watering Texas-sized ribs tossed in country fried steak batter. Order your Crispy Ribs as an appetizer or a full rack entree with your choice of 2 sides. Each order comes with 1 of 3 new dipping sauces: the creamy avocado salsa, sweet Kentucky, or the sweet mango chipotle sauce. Chili's Crispy Ribs are available for a limited time only, so hurry in and enjoy a crispy, juicy ribs experience today. Chili's is on the 2nd floor at the Two Monsands Plaza. Chili's, we do ribs like no place else.
Hafa-day, this is Michelle from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
They're back. Any footlong is a $5 footlong when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So I was way out in the parking lot there, wondering if there were any Catholic masses being held out there. And when I heard that cannon fire, I had to come rushing in here, but it was so loud I could hear it in the parking lot. Okay, so back to John Brown here. And where am I with John Brown? Yeah. He's talking about, as a general principle, when we're talking about regulations, governmental regulations, the general statement is expressed in language such as, quote, the state's important regulatory interests are generally sufficient to justify reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions, like no parking on this side of the street, or no dogs allowed in the park. But when those regulatory interests are contested, the court must first consider the character and magnitude of the asserted injury to the rights protected. Then the court must identify and evaluate the precise interests put forward by the state as justifications for the burden imposed by its rule. The court must not only determine legitimacy and strength of those interests, it must also consider the extent to which those interests make it necessary to burden the plaintiff's rights. These three considerations then get tested under various levels of scrutiny, depending on the nature of the public's rights and the duties of the government to protect health and safety. So this fact-based matter is a very simple explication of the legal issues. Still, it's worth pointing out that one critical question the courts consider in this context, to one degree or another, is, are there any less onerous ways to fulfill the duty to protect without burdening the public unreasonably? The approach taken in D.C. takes such an approach. It does not lock down everyone. It leaves businesses who take reasonable precautions to prevent the spread alone, but closes and takes away the licenses of irresponsible businesses. This discrimination requires two things. First, transparent contact tracing, and second, investigating the business to assure it meets mandatory anti-spread rules such as masking, etc. Guam can and does both those. This level of regulation would satisfy the least restrictive alternative test and eliminate indiscriminate shutdowns. Effective tracing coupled with transparent identification of no-go places keeps good businesses in the game, keeps employees gainful, keeps social contact possible, and keeps the rhythm of, and John uses the word, normalcy. He's a pretty good guy, but he puts it in quotes, so maybe he's just teasing me. Yeah.
It was made for you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. He says that, and keeps the rhythm of normalcy that is a salve for lockdown crankiness. So he makes a really good point here. I heard the governor say, I was in a bar and nobody was wearing masks. And I went to a funeral and no one was wearing. So the idea, if you go into a bar and nobody's wearing a mask, just shut all the bars down. That'll show them. Yeah. Right, Jose. So John makes a really good point here. We should, if we're going to enforce something, we should shut down the places that are not complying with the regulations and let the other ones stay open and identify the places that are no-go places. Very good idea instead of this, oh, we're going to go to POS 1 now. What's POS 1? I don't know, but we've done it before. I had an interesting post on Facebook that it's kind of long, but I think I'm going to take a minute here to read it before I go to Lou versus the People. This is from John Bouchard. He said, I never dreamed that I would have to face the prospect of not living, and this is in quotes, so it's not his thought, in the United States, at least not the one I have known all my life. I never wished to live anywhere else. This is my home, and I was privileged to be born here. But today I woke up, and as I had my morning coffee, realized that everything is about to change. No matter how I vote, no matter what I say, something evil has invaded our nation, and our lives are never going to be the same. Now, I remember one of our regular callers, I believe it was week before last, once again alerted us to the fact that in the world there's such a thing as good and evil. We should always try to stay on the side of the good and fight the evil. I have been confused by the hostility of family and friends. I look at people I have known all my life, so hate-filled that they agree with opinions they would never express as their own. I think that I may well have entered the twilight zone. We don't have that sound effect, do we, Jose? Yeah.
No. I mean, I can do it, but it's not the same.
All right, we'll skip that for now. Rod Serling, you have now entered the twilight zone. You can't justify this insanity. We have become a nation that has lost its collective mind. And here are some items. If a dude pretends to be a woman, you are required to pretend with him. Somehow it's un-American for the census to count how many Americans are in America. Russians influencing our elections are bad, but illegals voting in our elections are good. It was cool for Joe Biden to blackmail the president of Ukraine, but it is an impeachable offense if Donald Trump inquires about it. 20 is too young to drink a beer, but 18 is old enough to vote. People who have never owned slaves should pay slavery reparations to people who have never been slaves. People who have never been to college should pay the debts of college students who took out huge loans for their degrees. Immigrants with tuberculosis and polio are welcome, but you better be able to prove your dog is vaccinated. Irish doctors and German engineers who want to immigrate to the U.S. must go through a vigorous vetting process, but any illiterate gangbangers who jump the southern fence are welcome. $5 billion for border security is too expensive, but $1.5 trillion for free health care is not. If you cheat to get into college, you go to prison. But if you cheat to get into the country, you go to college for free. People who say there is no such thing as gender are demanding a female president. I like that one. People who say there is no such thing as gender, we got to have a female president. We see other countries going socialist and collapsing, but it seems like a great plan to us. Some people are held responsible for things that happened before they were born, and other people are not held responsible for what they're doing right now. Criminals are caught and released to hurt more people, but stopping them is bad because it's a violation of their rights. And pointing out this hypocrisy somehow makes us racists. Nothing makes sense anymore. No values, no morals, no civility. People are dying of the Chinese virus, but it's racist to refer to it as Chinese, even though it began in China. We are clearly living in an upside-down world where right is wrong and wrong is right, where moral is immoral and immoral is moral, where good is evil and evil is good, where killing murderers is wrong, but killing innocent babies is right. Wake up, America. The great unsinkable ship, Titanic America, has hit an iceberg, is taking on water and is sinking fast. The choice is yours to make. What will it be? Time is short. Make your choice wisely. And John says they're not his words, but very accurate and disturbing. I have to agree. Very interesting, sarcastic enough to pass the tall tales test, pointed enough to be read over the air. Okay, I'm going to go. I may come back to Vince Akimoto's words about the virus is the enemy, but I think I'll go next to GovWam workers will get differential pay, and this is labeled Lou LG versus the people. I guess I'll wait just a second because believe it or not, I have a call from the most dangerous.
In 2012, after winning election in 2000.
The most dangerous man in the room. Yeah. Here he is, folks. The moment we've all been waiting for. The most dangerous man in the room, also known as our Carl. How you doing, our Carl?
All right, Bob. You make me feel like I need to go buy a dark trench coat and one of those.
Yeah.
What do they call them? Snap brim hats or something that secret agents wear.
Yeah. Yeah, and some kind of a snazzy European car for sure. And
yeah,
and go to Netflix and watch a lot of James Bond movies. Work on your dialect a little bit.
Yeah, and I need to get one of those newspapers and cut out 2 eye holes.
Yeah,
so I can be sitting on a park bench while I'm observing people. And
what you're spying. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a cutting-edge spy trick.
Very good, Carl. Very good.
Newspaper with eye holes.
Yeah.
Don't want to be too obvious.
So what can you tell me today, our Carl?
I just wanted to add in a bit about, that piece you were reading from your Facebook posters.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very famous book that was written in the second half of the 1800s by Charles Mackay called Extraordinarily Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it still sells very well today, often to investors because they like to take advantage of the madness of crowds when people do completely irrational things. When there's panic and they sell off stocks and stocks get very cheap. So investors really love that book. But the first 100 pages, I've heard if you just read the first 100 pages, it's a chronicle of the madness of crowds. Things like the tulip mania, when the price of tulips just went sky high and people were selling everything they had and buying tulips because they figured that was their way to fortune. And eventually it burst, And there's his other examples. I've read pieces of it, but not the whole thing. But I really think we're in that kind of stage now, and I never really thought I would get to witness it, but I think we're really witnessing a kind of mass hysteria. And something that was even more concerning, sometimes I listen to Scott Adams. He's the guy that created Dilbert, and he's written many, many books. He's really a bright guy, very smart. But in one of his daily videos he put out, he talked about the possibility of civil war, and he said there's 3 possible triggers that we're coming up to that could trigger an actual civil war. One of them is if Trump wins and the Democrats and others believe he cheated and it's a stolen election, that could trigger something very bad. Another one is if Biden-Harris wins and the Republicans and people who voted for Trump think that it's a stolen election, that they cheated, and that's already happening. Both sides are already accusing the other side of cheating and trying to steal the election. And there's a third one. It slips my mind. I don't know what it is, but I really think we're seeing, first time in my lifetime I can think of, the strongest example of the madness of crowds. I mean, it's just bizarre, you know. I saw a meme one time of someone making fun of the fact that he doesn't wear a mask to the door of a restaurant, and then in order to come in the restaurant, he's got to put on a mask, and then he can walk 10 or 15 feet to go to a table, and then he's got to take off the mask in order to eat his food. And he said, it's the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. I've done a lot of crazy things. And, you know, I saw a guy walking through my neighborhood, you know, one day for his morning walk, all alone. There's no one around in the houses, or, you know, there's no one out on the streets. He's wearing a mask. And I just thought, wow, that's kind of a metaphor for what we see going on these days. You know, it's just we've seemed to have gone off the deep end in a way. So it's very it's kind of fascinating to watch. Anyway, I just thought I'd add that 2 bits to the comments that are made, since I think they kind of complement that.
Well, you're right, Carl. And, you know, my analysis is of the election that's coming up in November. No matter who wins, there's going to be a period of extreme chaos. It's going to be like every city is going to be Portland and Seattle. Because if Trump wins, the Antifa, Black Lives Matter, cultural Marxist folks will be so upset that they'll see it as their duty to trash the whole country. And if they win, when they take office on January 20, they'll trash the whole country, but in a different way, by trying to quickly turn the United States of America into the United States of Venezuela. So either way, from November on, it's not going to be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and people on the right are also accusing them of trying to steal the election, so there's going to be a lot of suspicion of that. And I remember the third one that Scott Adams commented on, the third trigger, and that is the Floyd trial. What do you say, the final decision at the end of the trial?
Yeah.
When the officers are found not guilty of murder, I mean, that will really cause some major problems, because you know, as more and more information has come out, it's clear that they've overcharged. They overreached with what they charged the officers with, because he was loaded up on fentanyl and some other stuff, and even, you know, the earlier minutes that were released when he was still in the car, in his own car, he was those early minutes, before he was even on the ground, he was already complaining about having trouble breathing. I'm having trouble breathing. I can't breathe. So that is really going to be a major, major problem.
Well, I looked into my crystal ball, Carl, and my analysis is that the most that the prosecution could get would be negligent homicide. And I'm basing that on a couple of websites that I saw that actually ran all of the film, which you've probably seen, all of the body camera film. And in summary, Floyd was acting very strange from the very beginning, acting extremely strange, acting like a child, doing really silly things, being apparent.
And the officers were really trying to
being apparently under the influence of some controlled substances. And then the autopsy showed that he did not suffocate. He did not die because no oxygen was getting to his lungs. He died of a heart attack. To further complicate matters, there was a diagram of the Minneapolis training materials that show how to deal with someone who is suffering anxiety because he's being arrested. And of course, that's natural. You know, someone who is arrested probably going to become anxious. He's going to fight or flight reaction will kick in. His heart rate will increase. His blood pressure will increase, etc. Some will react to it more severely than others. So the Minneapolis Police Department method of dealing with that was to put the person on the ground and put your knee on his neck until you could summon medical personnel to come and take care of him. And that's exactly what he did. If you were to take all of those things at face value, and then the autopsy said that he died of a heart attack. So perhaps the officers could be stuck with negligence if they knew that he had that potential for anxiety and didn't treat him properly. But even that, I would say, is not a sure thing. So a thinking jury could bring in a negligent homicide verdict or a not guilty verdict. And if that happens, it will make what happened after in L.A., it'll make that look like a garden party by comparison, because we have reached the point where a lot of people that live in this country don't want a Republican form of government anymore. They want pure democracy. They want the mob to rule, and they want the mob to rule right now and give them the kind of justice they think that they deserve. So it's going to be tough if that when that happens.
French Revolution all over again. Hopefully not as bad, but it's that same mindset, you know, where they want to tear down everything and totally remake everything. I think during the French Revolution they were trying to rename the months of the year, and I mean they just wanted to destroy everything and just start fresh. You know, I think a lot of like hundreds of thousands of Catholics get slaughtered during that French Revolution.
Frenchie even mentioned that in one of his calls. So his uncle even commented on that. Carl, I got to let you go. I got the 7th inning stretch coming up. Thanks for calling.
All right, Bob. It's always good talking with you.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Wow, nice smile. So perfect and all.
Thanks. I owe it all to Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team. They do wonders for a healthy, happy mouth.
Got teeth? Don't wait until they hurt. Schedule your routine checkup and cleaning with Dr. Yang and his Smile team. Suite 119 in the East West Business Center, Upper Tumon. Call 647-8702 or 3.
The best thing that happened to teeth since toothpaste.
Dr. Yang and his Smile team.
They make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties, doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
Seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, and we go from Chicago straight to Paris. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I had a pretty scary image in my thoughts earlier when you talk about Carl being in a trench coat. I was thinking, I hope he doesn't get too close to one of those schools because he could get in trouble. Yeah.
You know, Frenchie, that's a flash of genius on your part.
Yeah. 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 It just happened like this. Anyhow, yeah, you mentioned earlier, me talking about good versus evil, which is basically the based on natural law, and I had talked about that in the perspective of the French Revolution, which was the beginning of all the Marxist movements, and which is the first step of modernism versus natural law. And one of the things that really sets things apart is that from that day on, the so-called progressive, quote unquote, kept on pushing science, and conservatives just, instead of putting good versus evil, you chose, and it was a very ill-advised decision, to use history and tradition. And history and tradition always lose versus science, even if the science is skewed. And natural law, for our civilization is based on the Judeo-Hellenic tradition, and sometimes it's at odds with each other. But and Christianity takes from both the Judeo and the Hellenic tradition, and it's quite important that if we want to influence this debate, that we return to the natural law of good versus evil. And in the case of the governor deciding unilaterally that churches are non-essential businesses, number one, churches are not businesses. They are house of worships, and just the fact that it is put in with businesses is kind of insulting. It's kind of the Jesus in the temple chasing the merchants, And what's more troubling, and you got that quite right, is the clericalism that was denounced by Pope Francis, which characterized those priests that want to make a career out of their, rather than serving the faithful and leading the sheep. They is still alive and well. A lot of people thought that when Aperon and Adrian Cristobal, who ran away when he was accused of having molested people, but who was the chancellor at the time, and it was a very nefarious person, and actually the one that went after Father Paul the first time he decided to speak up, and at the time he was speaking out against the NCW, trying to get in his parish without following the GERM. And this is quite interesting because what we see now, we had that period of honeymoon with Archbishop Burns, and I think people were very happy to see a new approach. After 30 years of Aperon being unilaterally making decisions, being corrupted himself, and we saw the depth of this corruption was really bad. When he finally left, I mean, there was kind of a sigh of relief from a lot of people, Catholics and non-Catholics, actually, you know, because a lot of non-Catholics also saw what happened. And Archbishop Burns was kind of a breath of fresh air coming in because he's more approachable. He doesn't go too much he doesn't have a driver, you know, he drives himself around, he does a lot of the things. So it was well received, and then he did this all reaching out to the victims and everything and tried to get the ball rolling. And unfortunately, because of clericalism and some of our local priests who were more interested in their career than taking on a parish or something like this, we ended up with Father Ron. And Father Ron is the archetype of a cleric in the bad sense of the word. And he's the second most important person right now in the Archdiocese. He's the Chancellor. And, you know, the fact that we have an absent Archbishop because of a health reason, but nonetheless, he's still absent. And we have a person who is not a local, with quite looking down on the local culture. So he is everything we should have in power, and he is. And he's the one that facilitated the governor from doing this. And I'm afraid that once again, Father Goffigan will be silenced and reprimanded for doing what every priest should do, which is, you know, take to heart the teaching of the Lord. And, you know, all the others are silent, even though sometimes in meetings they might agree and everything. But, you know, actions are louder than words. And the actions of Father Paul and his commission are quite loud. And the actions of Father Ron Richards are very loud too, because he's one of those appeasers. And we have seen what appeasers do, you know. Chamberlain and Daladier were appeasers of Hitler. And we saw how mistaken they were. You cannot appease, especially when you're fighting evil. And to me, the governor is a representative of evil. She is the one that advocates for the slaughter of children. And to me, it's not acceptable. But she was elected because people were lazy, people didn't watch out, and the church refused to intervene and tell people what the tenets of our religions are, right? So here we are all over again, and here we are again where you have a single priest screaming in the desert, and the other ones being silent, and the other ones trying to silence the others. And, you know, so when you go back to good versus evil, we're right there in the middle of it.
True enough, Frenchie.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, I would advise the faithful to take their phone and call the chancery and let them know they're not happy, and do it in large number. I saw that CCOG was planning to get a hold of the Archbishop and let him know what they think. I know I already wrote to the nuncio, and it's, you know, if bad things happen when good people say nothing, and this is where we are now. You have a lot of people willing to remain silent, and this is not right.
Certainly, Frenchie, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So let's keep your eyes and ears open and see what's going to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised. Father Ron is a Father Cristobal in the making, and that's very sad. I'm not talking about the sexual escapade and things like that, but I'm talking as far as the approach, the dictatorial approach, the unwise decision, and the lack of following his vows as a priest.
Well, I'm just looking for someone who would stick up for the church. And, you know, there are people that have stuck up for the church And
Well,
it would be nice if some of those inside the church would do it also.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was kind of sad that for a couple of years, the only one that would stick out for the church were a couple of hundred mamamkos, some of them that had a very hard time moving, that were picketing the cathedral. But, you know, you would think that would be the young people taking the lead, because the young people do not like injustices. But the young people have been so brainwashed and to just say nothing. And unfortunately, on this island, they are not leading except on issues that are actually not really relevant. But that's unfortunate. Yeah. All right. So that was my piece today.
Well,
Sorry, I was preaching a little bit.
Well, that's good, Francie. We always look forward to your calls. You're knowledgeable and you're direct, and that works out very well on Tall Tales. Thanks again.
You're most welcome, Bob. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. So our friend Frenchie called it pretty well. I'm not going to say anything more about that issue, but if you are a priest, look like a priest, wear your collar when you're out in public, act like a priest, be an advocate for the Catholic Church. That would be my 2 words of wisdom. I'm going to go back to picking on, oh, wait a minute. I'm going to go back to talking about the governor. Next item on the card, the governor versus the people. And this is a story from the Post. GovGuam workers will get differential pay. I'm so happy for them. And here's how the story goes. The government of Guam's return to POS 1 means certain GovGuam employees at the front line. I'm not going to use that term anymore. It's so meaningless. Will receive pay differential. Wuhan differential pay is being paid to workers based on their level of exposure to Wuhan virus, stated Governor's Press Secretary Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco. The number of individuals receiving differential pay, which may, now here we are with May, right? Which may be paid with federal funds, won't be known until timesheets are reported. Now there, it's not clear what May means, right? May could mean that we've already got the permission, and on the other hand, it could be just speculative. Well, maybe they can be paid with the federal funds. Governor Leon Guerrero, in an executive order, listed 3 differential pay categories. Category 1, 25% pay differential to essential employees in the course of their duties who are in direct contact or in close proximity to a population infected with Wuhan virus. Now, that would not be the 19th floor, because people on the 19th floor were quarantined, not isolated. But I'll bet you most of those on the 19th floor got it. Category 2, 15% pay differential to essential employees in the course of their duties who may come in contact or close physical proximity to a population infected with Wuhan virus. 1, which is 25%, is people who are in direct contact. 2 is people who may be in direct contact. Boy, I'm going to have to work on that word may a little bit more, huh?
Sounds like they're given permission.
Right. So maybe they could be in contact with it. And then category 3, this is the biggest waste of all. 10% pay differential to essential employees whose position do not allow them to telework and are mandated to perform their job duties at physical work sites in response to Wuhan. However, this category was removed in a previous executive order and is no longer applicable to government workers. Well, that's good news. During the first POS 1, the cost of pay differential to GovGuam was about $890,000 per pay period, and $22 million had been set aside. The differential pay was based on risk. Employees with no risk or minimum risk exposure. Categories 1 and 2 include firemen, police officers, nurses, healthcare workers, and people working at quarantine sites. Now, that shouldn't be. Right there, people working at quarantine sites, because you're not going to encounter someone who has the disease at a quarantine site. Isolation site, yes. The Guam Power Authority, which previously paid double pay to its employees and managers during POS 1, isn't paying double pay this time, the agency stated. The local government has set aside funds from the federal government on the CARES Act for hazardous duty pay. So this article is followed by another one. It's really heartbreaking after 44 years. And I'm going to come back to that after I answer the phone here. I've got Ken LG, and who else have I got holding here, Jose? Don't know yet, huh? Okay, so I'm going to start out with the other governor, Leon Guerrero. I suppose we should use the music for Hail to the Chief, right, Ken?
Well, in the morning they use the Masterpiece Theater opening theme. There you go.
Okay. A suitable entree.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ken. You deserve it.
Huh. Well, when you hit this topic, I had to call in because, just when you think the governor can't get more divisive, she continues to amaze us by showing how flexible she is and that there are no limits to where she's willing to go to divide the people. And this is a perfect example. I mean, if you look at the government employees that are slated for this differential, what about their counterparts? Not all the nurses are government nurses. A lot of the nurses work in clinics. What about differential for them, or differential for the doctors and the med techs? What about differential for the grocery clerks and gas station attendants who come in contact with more people an hour than the government and Guam people who would be in these positions? But they don't get any differential. And then we look at, the 40,000 plus people who aren't getting any pay because their businesses have been shut down and they've been laid off. We're talking about nearly $900,000 a pay period, plus the $1 million a day of government payroll that's paid out, even though people aren't working. Just imagine the things we could do for this community with, that $3 million, $2 million pay period.
Yeah,
it just boggles the mind.
Good point, Ken. I kind of look at it from the other direction. People who work in hospitals always work around sick people. That's the nature of a hospital. So one would think that would be part of their regular pay structure. And, it's kind of like, well, we'll pay a fireman $3,000 a month, but if he has to put out a fire, we'll pay him more money. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially now, and especially when you take into consideration that this whole scheme is the governor's executive order, which I have ruled she does not have the authority to do. But if she did, she would also have the authority to cancel it now that we're into this second round of lockdownism.
Well, it goes even further. She can do anything she wants to do until she's challenged, and we have an attorney general that won't challenge her on anything. He won't even challenge criminals. But he will join every class action suit that comes along. So unless someone's willing to file a class action suit against the governor, I don't think we can count on any support from the attorney general, which is why I maintain we need to get rid of him and get an elected public prosecutor.
Well, isn't it true, Ken, that it's, with respect to one crime, he went to the mat with the criminal, with the guy?
Are you talking about the quarantine runner?
Yeah. What was his name again?
Matt.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Of course, he didn't commit a crime that was in the Guam Civil Code. You know, he violated an executive order. Just imagine where he would be if the legislature hadn't finally gotten a backbone and not passed. I forget what bill, 332 or one of the 300 bills that gave the governor the ability to confine people or fine them up to $5,000 for violating any executive order.
Right.
So what we're looking at here is we have a government that's in trouble financially, and for those of you who don't listen to the budget hearings, and I don't blame you, because it's kabuki theater and it's not good kabuki theater, the top people in the administration.
I gotta take a break, and you want to hang on through the break?
Sure.
Okay.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified, serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, 7 as you were, home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. I'm on the line with the other governor, Leon Guerrero, and I've got Keith in the green room, Ken. So we got to make sure we give Keith a chance to get on the air before the end of the program. Go ahead.
I'll wrap up real quick. The thing that upset me so much about this differential is that we have 40,000 people who are on unemployment, and the governor refuses to even apply for the $400 that Trump has authorized through his executive order. Look at the difference. He issues an executive order to take care of the people, and the governor refuses to do it, preferring to keep the money to fund government operations. So it shows that she clearly doesn't care about what's happening to the people. Because if she did, she would have been the first one in line, because we have the time zone advantage. The press conference took place after 5 o'clock, and we were first. We could have had the first application in and taken care of those people who are unemployed right now through no fault of their own. But she's not willing to set aside money to take care of the people that are unemployed. And remember, that's what the CARES Act money was for, was to help the people get through this pandemic. But she's not willing to do that. She wants to preserve that money for governmental operations. And we saw her budget, her $117 million, Gucci laptop cases and things like that, 4K TVs. I mean, her priorities are all messed up. The government and Guam employees have a job, they have a paycheck. And 40,000 people don't. And when I was listening to the budget hearings, that's where I was talking about that they're keeping the good stuff to themselves because they're maintaining this fiction that everything's going to be great. We can handle $1 billion budget next year. So the problem is, and BJ coined it, Adeloop is where math goes to die, and on its way it goes through the 35th legislature. So, we need to, I'm hoping that the senators, develop a backbone and stand up and say, hey, this executive order, we're going to override it. Just like they overrode several of the executive orders, the laws that she wanted to enhance her executive orders. Because someone has to stand up for the people for a change, and it's not Adeloop, and it's not the majority of the senators in the 35th legislature. So it's going to be up to the people themselves. Thank God we have an election coming up, don't you think?
True enough, Ken. So I know you're going to be standing up out there. So let me bid you adieu and give Keith a few minutes of airtime, okay?
Okay.
Thanks for calling, Ken. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Keith. Good afternoon. Just a follow-up, 30-second follow-up on what the gentleman just said. Clearly the governor's interests are in maintaining government and maintaining government employees. And frankly, look around the country. She's a Democrat. That's what they do. They're not interested in the people. They pay lip service to it, but really they're interested in maintaining big government. Anyway, is it really POS2? I thought it was Core 2, COR2, or 1 rather.
Well, there is a special language that's used on Tall Tales and on The Point.
Okay, that's what I thought, because I chuckled to myself saying, really? Is it PS? Because I love your version better.
Okay, well, Ray, I have to give credit to Ray because Ray trotted or rolled out POS this morning, and one of the participants, it might have been Mana, said, POS, what does that mean? And Ray said, you don't know what POS means? So that's
very good.
That's part of the Tall Tales vocabulary, Keith.
Gotcha. Listen, the reason I was calling is I have some coworkers that are going to be arriving in the next couple of weeks, and they're going to have to go on quarantine. And I'm just wondering if you have an in, so I can get them on the 19th floor.
You want your coworkers to go to the 19th floor?
The 19th floor, exactly. I figure I'd treat them well while they're here.
The music for the 19th floor, Jose. Oh. Yeah, we're still working on our routines here, Keith. Sorry.
I'm still in the basement. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Well, I think that perhaps. There you go. That's 19th floor. Yeah. So if you were asking me if I had any pull to get somebody on the 19th floor, I think the kind of pull that I would have with the Leon Guerrero administration would probably work against you rather than for you. And whether being on the 19th floor is a good thing or a bad thing, I think depends on where you are with the government.
Very good. Okay, well, I thought I'd give it a shot.
Thanks for calling, Keith.
Bye-bye, Bob.
Okay, that's it for another day. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Tall Tales. Adios.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Night One wrap-up I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The opening night of the Democrat National Convention filled with speeches delivered remotely, many of them pre-recorded, ending with a former occupant of the White House.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama, in a primetime address at the DNC, made the case for